Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what are some of your most memorable cases? I once represented a client from a divorcing couple who still lived together pending the sale of the family home but would not speak to one another for any reason whatsoever. Had to negotiate terms with opposing counsel for the sharing of refrigerator space. My brother is a divorce attorney. His most memorable case. He was representing a guy in a divorce custody battle who was accused of horrific child abuse. Very graphic. Very detailed depositions from the young kids against daddy. Things look grim. Then my brother, a failed actor, notices the deposition transcript, done by social workers under oath, contains a question at the end from one of the kids: did I hit my marks? He wonders how little kids know about acting jargon. Subpoenas wife's personal checking account during discovery. Sure enough, acting lessons. Deposes an extremely sketchy acting coach. And panicked coach produces DVDs of practice interrogations with the kids. Hours of coaching the kids on exactly what imaginary things to say about daddy. He says it was his one and only Perry Mason moment in 20+ years of practice. And dad got sole custody of the kids. Not a lawyer, but as a courthouse clerk, I had a court order come across my desk that explicitly banned a father from playing Minecraft with his son over the internet because the ex-wife alleged that the in-game chat was a form of improper contact that wasn't outlined in their custody visitation plan. Case 1. Honduran couple came in for divorce consult. I informed them I could only represent and advise one of them, and wife called first, so I am representing her. He furiously storms out. 2 days later, he hides in the bushes outside the house where she is staying. When she leaves to go to work, he jumps out and decapitates her with a machete. 2 small kids in the house. Terrible it. Case 2. On the day of a divorce trial involving adultery grounds, opposing counsel produces photos of my male client, the husband, wearing lingerie and long brown wig, blowing another dude. I successfully exclude this from evidence on the grounds of relevance, because the wife was the photographer. I wouldn't recommend it, but one of the best ways to stick it to your ex and to skip most of fallout is to die during the legal battle. In this case the couple orally was declared divorced, but before the official paperwork is finalized the husband dies. So what does the court do? Well, it takes the courts 2 years to sort out how this should be handled. And then the court says that the divorce proceedings must continue with somebody to represent the husband's interests. So now the wife has to divide everything 50/50 with a dead man. If he had died 2 weeks sooner she would have avoided years of court hearings, thousands in legal fees, and kept everything for herself. My aunt has been divorced for quite some time. She drives our attorney crazy with her requests demands. Most recently she took her husband to court over 1. He switched the beneficiary of his life insurance policy from her, the ex-wife, to their children. 2. She wants court-ordered drug tests weekly. She found out from her friend who works at a pharmacy that he has had quite a few narcotic prescriptions, but obviously can't enter that into evidence, or friend will be fired. 3. Wants to know the days he's working and locations, so she can have her private investigator keep an eye out and make sure the new girlfriend isn't joining him at hotels he's charging on his work card. At some point, she just needs to let it go and move on. She got the house, and the house payments, the kids, the boat, and the Marriott points. He doesn't pay alimony or child support, so it seems like it worked out well. Had a husband and wife go toe to toe over an ashtray they got in Vegas at some point. Neither smoked, strangely enough. Spent nearly $5,000 for me and another attorney to duke it out in court over the silly thing. Prior to proceeding, I explained what the cost would be for to argue over something silly like this and that he could give me $2,500 and I would fly to Vegas for the weekend and get him an identical one instead. He said he didn't care about the costs because he intended to smash it on the courthouse steps in front of her if we won. We won and he followed through with the smashing. He laughed and said the look on her face was worth much more than $2,500. People get crazy in divorce proceedings. Worked as courtroom clerk front desk when I was in college. A couple argued on the custody details on their son. I thought it was the normal "I won't let you see him, you piece of it." But the mom wants the dad to spend more time during holidays together, all 3 of them. And the dad wants to do the same, just more frequently. They ended up reconciled and agreed to couples therapy before the divorce procedure went further. Then they came back a month later to withdraw the divorce proceeding. I'm a real estate lawyer, but a friend of a friend is a divorce lawyer. I was once told a story where said lawyer was brutally attacked by a client's former spouse. Apparently the former spouse blamed the divorce attorney for taking him to the cleaners in the divorce. The worst part is that the lawyer was at the grocery store doing his weekly food shopping with his wife and kids when he was savagely beaten. Criminal lawyers work with the worst people on their best behavior. Family lawyers work with the best people on their worst behavior. Edit. Thank you kind stranger for my first Reddit gold. You'd are real MVP. Worked for a family law lawyer in Santa Cruz. One of her frequent opponents, a decent, if aggressive, lawyer, just down the street, got a package bomb wrapped like a Christmas present. He picked it up, and it blew up in his face, blew off most of his fingers, and left shrapnel in his face and chest. Last I heard, he dropped out of the legal profession. Happened on Christmas Eve in 1996. My mom works in divorce court. She comes home with stories that are interesting, sad, funny, and sometimes just weird. It's what you would expect for the most part. Then there are the drug addicts that don't want to give up custody. The day of the drug test comes and the person miraculously decided to shave their entire body. Tests are now given right after the judge asks for one. And some are hilarious when you are not the one involved. My favorite is, a voicemail is played in court as evidence. The wife is cheating on the guy. This voicemail is from the husband to the wife. Hey, I know you are there. The only reason you can't answer is because I know you can't speak with that guy's D in your mouth. Sometimes my mom has those stories which are funny if you are not involved. A friend who is a lawyer told me a pretty crazy story about a wealthy couple splitting up. The woman hid millions of dollars overseas and cut up all her husband's clothing with a pair of scissors. These shenanigans caused her to get almost nothing. My first trial, my client was being sued for a divorce on grounds of habitual cruel and inhuman treatment. Her husband alleged that she grabbed his D really hard and hurt it. He alleged it was on purpose. I had to cross-examine him about it. I had a case where the husband found some incriminating texts on his wife's phone that she was cheating on him with some guy and also gets the impression his sister-in-law might be in on it in some way. Him and his brother end up hiring a pie to tail them both to get the truth. They essentially confirm that both women are seeing other people. The sister-in-law admitted full guilt of sleeping with another man and they attempted to reconcile, but his brother eventually filed for divorce. The one wife admitted she was looking to sleep with the guy, but they only met for some kisses and she touched his D a little bit in hoping that would prove that she was still faithful since she couldn't go through with it. He filed for divorce anyway. Also, a serious tag helps these kinds of threads. I'm a divorce lawyer. Most of these comments are pretty negative and none of them are actually stories. I'd love to share some, but it's against our professional rules of ethics to describe anything specific enough that someone reading it would recognize him or herself in it. That being said, I've seen people fight over calculators, underwear, llamas, who burned down the barn, and other ridiculously petty things, to more serious cases of domestic violence and child sex abuse. Yes, divorce lawyers can be emotionally distant. This is a coping mechanism, and a necessary one at that. Yes, divorce lawyers are expensive, but they are a privilege which can save you from getting totally screwed, subject to the law of your state and the humor of your judge. I feel like my fees are fair, considering I have a doctorate in law, and I'm using my time and experience to give my clients advice and steer them through the process while protecting their rights, fighting for a favorable outcome, saving them from being at every court date, and all of this while adhering to state, county, and court rules and case law. I always give my clients a choice when I think what they are fighting for is not worth it for what they will pay in fees. Also, I think one challenge for us is most non-lawyers don't realize how counterintuitive the system is and how evidence doesn't just come in automatically. It can be a tough battle, and you have to make lots of sacrifices along the way. But, as I remind them, no one really wins when you are splitting everything you have in half. Edit. Spacing. Edit. Okay, actually a lot more of these are stories now, and really good ones. My client had a son named Snoop Frog and neither parent wanted custody. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but when I was at a mediation a few months ago, the mediator was telling me about a divorce he mediated a few years back. It was your classic rich guy is sick of his wife and kids and wants a divorce to run off with a young, hot piece of ass. His wife wanted blood. She came to the mediation with some pretty outrageous demands about the money and property she'd receive. The mediator pushed hard throughout a long day of mediation, but she hadn't budged an inch. Finally, very late in the day, the husband threw up his hands and said, "Duck it, give her everything she's asking for and let's be done with it." The mediator went back to the wife's conference room to share the good news that the husband had caved in, and she flipped the duck out, glowing incandescent with rage at the idea that her husband was willing to pay truly insane compensation to be done with her and ride off with his little girlfriend. I worked for a law firm while in college and we had a client who had just come home from a 2-week vacation with his wife only to be served with divorce papers and a temporary restraining order as soon as they pulled in the driveway. Wife didn't say a word and just went into their house. Poor guy came straight to our office and was massively confused, to say the least. My father did divorce law for many years. We were in Virginia Beach for a tournament I was in with a friend of mine and his father. This is back around 07. My dad got a call from a forensic accountant he hired to track down some accounts his client knew her husband stashed money in. He was asked to pull over and to put him on speaker because he would not believe what he was about to tell him. The accountants traced all of his money to 3 bank accounts totaling over $300 million in another country. My friend's father screamed. My father dropped his phone and there were numerous WTF from the back seat. My father's client made out with 2 of the 3 accounts and they walked away silently. He was paid in full, given a small bonus and has never heard from her again. The husband's statement of property listed all the food in the kitchen as of the date of separation, complete with estimated values for each item. Campbell's vegetable soup $0.79. Not a divorce lawyer but a child of divorce. Happened when I was about 6 or 7. I'm 18 now. I learned this about a year ago. My mother often likes to talk about how my father didn't offer any financial assistance during the divorce and his involvement was purely selfish. And a common thing she's told me is that he's never paid for my schooling, which is true post-divorce. However, what I learned was that during the divorce he offered to pay for half of all of my school fees. She instead chose child support, which he has paid for every year. She also took all of their combined savings out and into my, 6 years old at the time, bank account, which my father had no access to. This meant when showing bank statements, my father had more money than my mother. I've lost some respect for her since then. Had a client whose soon-to-be ex-husband used her email address and phone number to sign her up for every bank, loan, religious, mental illness, and pornographic site he could think of. She was bombarded by people contacting her about her interest in their product services. He even put out ads for 6 partners on Craigslist with her information. The kicker is that she actually went out with a guy who contacted her. If I learned anything being a divorce attorney, I no longer practice. It was that if the opposing party sounded like a nutcase, I would soon see the nutcase come out of my own client. Normal people don't just accidentally marry crazies, not often. Divorce lawyer here. I've never had anything too crazy. The worst I can think of is representing my client who had to be transported from the jail for, allegedly, violating the restraining order between the two. There was another one that was technically a dissolution of domestic partnership, not a divorce, but essentially the same thing for never married parties. That was fairly crazy. Client alleged her ex had killed a man and reported it to the police, but I guess they never found the body. Also alleged his attorney was sleeping with him. One of my co-workers had a case where the ex was awarded the couple's dog in the divorce only to have it euthanized just so the other would suffer more. I don't care how bad your relationship is. There is no excuse for that. That pissed me off to hear about. Back when I was in law school I was a clerk for a judge that heard a lot of divorce cases. The craziest one involved a gambling addict. The guy would write ridiculous checks to the local casino, $20 K, $30 K, even $100 K plus, all the time. The wife admitted to going with him to the casino each time. but said she only played the penny slots and had no idea he was spending that much money. Because they were splitting the remaining assets, that was still substantial. She wanted the money he spent at the casino to count against him so she would get a whole lot more. While there were copies of the checks, it was his word against hers as to whether she knew about them and whether she was also playing the high stakes games. The husband said she knew and she played the high stakes games too. I remember the oral hearing was the last week that I worked there, so I never heard how it turned out. I do, however, remember the judge thinking they were both lying, which all good judges always believe. I had a client that was being sued by her baby's daddy for custody and child support. He had a weapons charge and drug charge on his recent record. My client, the mother, was clean. During cross-examine I asked about those charges and asked if he was subjected to a test. Would he pass? He answered in the affirmative. The judge, upon request from counsel, me, had the sheriff's office administer a test for both. He, the father, failed. My client, the mother, passed. Judge awarded my client custody and child support. It isn't that interesting. But what makes it funny is this was my first family law case, and opposing counsel was a very well-known and tough family law attorney. At our hearing, opposing counsel came in and she literally demanded we agree to her client's terms or else she, my client, would never see the kid again. I offered that her client, the father, get weekends, etc. standard visitation schedule. She declined and her client failed the drug test administered after the hearing. A client passed. That's pretty minor, but it was a pretty cool win for a young attorney up against a big name. She also left me a voicemail congratulating me for kicking her ass at the hearing and called me a humble son of a bitch for presenting our offer considering our knowledge of the drug and weapons charge. All for naught since the clients ended up back together a year and a half later. Imagine that. Edit. I think a lot of confusion comes from the fact a woman attorney was representing a father suing the mother for custody and support. I am guessing everyone confused had their mind bent by the gender designations. Come on people. It's 2015. Not divorce related but still interesting. When a local couple died, their will indicated that their house and sizable fortune would remain in trust, managed by family friends, until their several cats died of natural causes. The odd thing is, it's been over 20 years now, and the cats are still alive. Also, they've changed color. I work for a mortgage company and occasionally we have to review divorce decrees if someone is divorcing to remove a spouse's name from the loan. There is a notorious case known around my pretty large department as the cat divorce decree account. In this divorce decree, there is a 5-page addendum specifically regarding Mittens and Buttons Johnson. Names changed for their protection. Memorable clauses included mandatory 10-minute Skype sessions weekly, no unsupervised play dates with children under 15, and that their claws be trimmed every 3 days. Here's a not divorced one, but it's pretty good. Husband and wife are from a culture where you simply do not divorce. They have a few kids. He moves on and dates a woman for nearly 20 years, and they also have a kid together. He does a will and tells no one how it is set up other than there is a trust. The guy dies. He made a trust for his entire estate. He designated that his kids would each be beneficiaries with equal percent interest, but also gave his girlfriend 1% more than his wife. She was also named as executor of the estate and trustee for the trust. Popcorn was had. 20+ year divorce lawyer here. I've seen it all. I once represented a husband divorcing his wife of 35+ years. They were in their late 60s. At mediation they divided up about $500,000 in assets within 30 minutes. Then they spent 2.5 hours fighting over 2 hurricane glasses from Pat O'Brien's and a pitchfork. Mediator. She really wants that pitchfork. It was a gift from her daddy. Husband. That itch. We bought it at Home Depot 2 years ago. And etc. They settled at mediation after spending over $1,000 in attorney fees combined for the glasses and pitchfork. They remarried 3 months later. I filed for divorce from my wife, of 10 years, well over 2 years ago because she got pregnant from an affair she had with her boss, and tried to sneak that new child into my family as a child of my own. I knew it wasn't mine, and proved it with a prenatal paternity test, went to mediation. The house is completely in my name. and she was supposed to move out in July of 2013. Problem was, she just refused to move out. Back to court. Cost her $3,000 in court costs. And she finally moved out. 2 months later. That lasted for 3 months. Because she was kicked out of the $1,300 a month 1-bedroom apartment she rented for non-payment. Read. She rented an apartment she couldn't even afford, in which the daughter we have together didn't even get her own room. Anyway, they, my wife, her illegitimate son, and our daughter, showed up on my doorstep late one night with nowhere else to go, and she asked to stay for a month or 2 while she found another place. Whatever, I said okay, because I wasn't going to allow my daughter to just live in a car with her. That itch stayed for another 1.5 years, before I finally finalized my divorce last week. During that time she was here. However, she hit my daughter in the face. I called the cops on her, got her arrested, and made tape recordings of her saying she'd do it again in a heartbeat if my daughter ever disrespected her. I immediately told my lawyer I wanted to remediate for primary custody of my daughter and $400 a month in child support, which was the other way around initially, which I not only got, but I also was awarded having my daughter 75% of the year, when it was only 46% previously. Now my wife must begin paying me that child support beginning the 1st of July, and absolutely must vacate my house by the 12th of July with all her possessions. She hasn't seemed to be actively seeking a new residence, so I have already arranged for the sheriff to be at my house on the 13th of July, and have hired some movers to come and remove all those possessions on the 13th. If she has no destination picked out for them, I've told them they can keep anything and everything they want. Duck her. And I'm finally going to be free of the monster that she is. TLDR. If you're getting divorced, don't ever let your ex to be step 1 foot in your house. You may have a tough time getting her to leave, but my lawyer and I roasted her ass in court, and things definitely didn't go the way she wanted them to. Yay me. And now she can go live under a bridge for all I care. Edited for clarity. Edit 2. This is a quote from a book that I read, not a marriage book. It was just a Greg Giles thriller. While all this was going on, that I used as my closing statement to the judge before all this was accepted and finalized, that I found to be completely apropos for my situation. The only life after death any human being will ever know is staying in a marriage or a partnership after it's over. And that's not life, it's living death. I think he liked it. After college I worked in a law firm dealing with family law and have a ton of stories. 1. At one time we had almost a dozen cases of high military personnel going through divorces because their wives came out of the closet after all their children grew up. 2. We had a client who was wealthy, but going through a divorce cause she was going crazy. She dressed like a homeless person, smelled like it, and once I delivered a copy of her husband's Discover to her and her house looked like a dump. I literally thought she was gonna kill me and bury me under the piles and piles of crap in her place. She also kept harassing her husband and his girlfriend, vandalizing the car, writing whore on the door of the condo, etc. We had to drop her as a client after she kept disobeying her attorney, etc. 3. We had a wealthy client who married a girl he met during tango classes and they had a child. He spent over $500,000 fighting for custody and she kept accusing him of sexual abusing their daughter to try and win, etc. Each side hired psychologists and experts, and in the end, it didn't matter if it wasn't the truth. The mother kept telling the girl she was abused and the experts said it was gonna damage her regardless. He eventually won partial custody. After 2 years of working there, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer and I don't want to get married. Haha. Divorcee. Not a lawyer, but I remember the blank stare from the lawyer I was paying $250 an hour to handle my case with my husband when I told him our biggest marital asset was our $10,000 Magic the Gathering card collection. Wonder why millennials aren't getting married. Husband and wife still living together at the time had a small confrontation. The husband pulls a sphincter, says what on her, and she takes the bait and says what. He giggled like a little kid. She then told her lawyer, who had to talk to his lawyer. His lawyer asked him if he called his wife a sphincter and told him he is not allowed to call her that anymore. The child, a 10-year-old girl, of my father client thanked me after the custody battle against the out-of-control alcoholic mother. The court awarded full physical and legal custody to the father. The child said to me that I was a lawyer for kids. I never forgot the compliment. That was 30 years ago. My grandfather went through a pretty high-stakes divorce about 10 years ago. He founded a consulting firm in 1994 that ended up being worth several $1,000,000. He was married to his second wife, not my grandmother, who was his first wife whom he divorced in the 80s when he founded it. She is an executive for a large health and beauty product company. They were both very successful. When they divorced, they had been living in a very large house in an exclusive neighborhood in an affluent southern suburb. She got the house and kept her wealth that she had amassed from her company. But that wasn't it. She also wanted 51% of my grandfather's company. She didn't win that in court because she had already won more than half of the assets. I doubt my grandfather really gave a duck about that, but I could be wrong. He just wanted to keep his company, which already made him plenty of money. Things got interesting after they separated. She allegedly hired a private investigator to stalk my grandfather. Yes, stalk. We found a tracking device attached to his car. No bullet. He moved into an apartment for a while during the divorce proceedings. She and her lawyer eventually went to his apartment to take pictures of everything he owned. He obviously let them into his apartment. They even opened up his fridge and took pictures of the inside of his fridge. My grandfather eventually started dating somebody else. Yes. At around age 60. He likes women. And the ex-wife would call my grandfather's house and talk to her, trying to appear friendly or something. It was just a very strange situation. It was even stranger for me. I had grown up with her sort of as my grandmother. I never knew she wasn't my actual grandmother until I met my dad's actual mom at age 7. I didn't meet my father until age 6. Mind you, it was kind of confusing until the divorce. But during and after the divorce, my grandfather's ex would call my mother to ask to take me out to dinner and movies and things like that. I remember seeing Star Wars Episode 3 in theaters with her. I didn't find it strange or anything. She had known me since I was born and served as a grandmotherly figure. However, my father hated her. I heard a lot of stories of the crazy shit she did to him when my dad was a teenager. I haven't talked to her for several years. I much prefer my actual grandmother. Divorce is strange. Seeing how easily it can tear families apart and duck over individuals. I'm definitely doing a prenup when if I get married. You never know. I'm not a lawyer but was in a painful divorce. I had my ex stand up before the judge and say, also, there is this item on his credit card from less than strip joint more than, and I had to look it up and I think it's a strip club. Since we were representing ourselves, I got the judge's attention and he let me speak. My response, Your Honor, she knows what the item is about because she was there that night and even got a lap dance from another lady. There were cool and I ate a few chuckles from the peanut gallery and the judge had this quiet hidden little grin that vanished quickly. It felt awesome to say because I'd been ducked over so much from the divorce. It was itty.